Welcome to Tawana Talks, where I give my reflections on simple life experiences that lend themselves to life lessons. Hey, and welcome to Tawana Talks. I want to thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you've listened to others, then welcome back. So I was recently asked, why do I do this? Why do I get on here and do these talks? Why am I interested in building relationships? And why do I do this? And so that got me thinking, when I first started the talks, it was started out of just a need to kind of get some things out, things that were on my mind, things that just needed to hash through. And in that moment, I started to just kind of write it down, journaling. And I've been journaling for a while, just getting those things out. And it's not a secret. I used to be a teacher in a classroom and then moved through the ranks of doing a multiplicity of things in education in every single area. And I just love teaching. And I believe that that's what I've been placed on this earth to do, is teach. And so this serves as a form of teaching, because teaching is really just reflecting on what you've learned and helping others to discover that knowledge as well, or bridge those gaps. But anywho, and so in just the years experience of teaching, my students would say, you should record these things, you should write these things down. And it never felt like, I'm like, it's not something that I prepare for or I plan for. It just happens in conversation. And that's the same thing with these talks. It just happens as I'm thinking and reflecting. But then it dawned on me that someone may have a need for what I'm reflecting on. And that someone is me. But someone else may have that need. And so why do I do this? I do this not out of a desire for being seen or being heard. It's not a want. I have a need for being able to kind of hash these things out and understand life and understand development of relationships, so that I can show up well in building relationships for my children and building personal relationships through life and building professional relationships. I need that. And so if I can be a conduit for facilitating that, then that's what I'm doing. And so why do I do it? Because it's a need. And so that got me thinking about talking about your needs and your wants. So I have 3 children, 2 adults and 1, at the time of this recording, 8-year-old. And she always, whenever she wants something, she always, most always, I would say about 94.3% of the time, she will say, I need. And I'm always, of the 94.3% of the time that she says need, I'm about 99% of the time saying, well, it's not a need, it's really a want, and helping her to understand in those aspects how extreme she's being. And then I combat it with another level of extremeness by saying, does your life depend on it? Like, if your life depends on it, then it's a need. Like, I'm trying to explain to her, like, needs are eating, needs are having something to drink, needs are love, those types of things. And although there are varying other levels of needs depending on the circumstance and the task at hand, but really, like, you don't need to finish this episode of the show when it's time for bed, those types of things. And so constantly having those conversations with helping to decipher between needs and wants, and just thinking about communicating your need and your want. She is very comfortable in her space with telling me what she needs, what she feels like she needs, and what she wants. Very comfortable. And there there was a song that was out, and as I was thinking about preparing for this message, I just was thinking about a song that was recorded by a um, a very talented group. We didn't call them boy bands. If you're an R&B group, I don't know. Side note, I don't know what deciphers a boy band versus a group. Is it the age? Is it the culture that makes you a boy band or a group? But this particular group was a group of men, and maybe they were young adults. I didn't research their age, but Drew Hill was a very popular group back in the 90s, and they had a song called Tell Me What You Want, Tell Me What You Need. And the lyrics were, tell me what you want, tell me what you need, tell me if it ain't good enough for you, baby. And those of you, I'm giving a second because I know that you're rocking with it and singing it. That was a particular two-step move that went with that when you heard that song. You can look it up if you don't know it. It's still on YouTube and it's still available. Very popular song. But as I was looking that song up, because I wanted to be sure of the title, and now that I just remember, I didn't even write down the title. It might be Tell Me What You Want. But even with those pieces of lyrics, you can find it. But as I was doing that, I was kind of looking up the specific title for it and the year that it came out. And it came out in 1996. And in my research of looking up that song, and the internet just makes it so readily available. Research is so easy when you have Le Google. But other songs came up. One particular, very popular one that I was not aware of because I'm not in tune with this current day age music and songs, but a K-pop group. And K-pop, my 8-year-old taught me, is Korean pop. And so it's called K-pop. I'm telling you, I was thinking about cake pops, but anywho, K-pop, a Korean pop song, and it is Talk That Talk by a group known as Twice. And the reason why they popped up when I put Tell Me What You Want, because in their song, Talk That Talk, is the lyric, tell me what you want, tell me what you need. I'm going somewhere with this, so follow me. And another song came up from 2016 by an artist known as Alex Clare, and his song was Tell Me What You Need. And in that song, it says, he says something about, and I may not be getting the lyrics exactly right, but he says, I'm not a mind reader. And he says, and you're not a heartbreaker. And after just kind of looking at the lyrics some more, what I interpret that as meaning is you're behaving as someone who breaks hearts because you are assuming that I know what you need. And I don't, because I'm not a mind reader. So tell me what you need. Talk that talk is what Twice is saying. Tell me what you need. Tell me what you want. You got to say something for me to know. Drew Hill, tell me what you want. Tell me what you need. Tell me if it ain't good enough for you, baby. I can't read your mind. No one can read your mind. And I thought about this, and I kind of talked about this before. I was a principal during the pandemic, and during that time, I was awarded the opportunity, if you will, and I do call it an opportunity because we were invited into individuals' homes really without even asking. We just turned on these Zooms and we were all up in people's spaces. And it wasn't until during the pandemic, some genius mind in these Zoom and other virtual spaces recognized the need for blurred backgrounds, the need for virtual backgrounds, the need for developing backgrounds, because those things did not exist pre-pandemic. And those things came about, in my mind, I'm thinking, because people wanted to shield their space. People wanted to protect their space. People didn't want you welcomed all up in their space. Like for me, for instance, really, you could my house and ring and knock on the door, and I could be looking at you out the peephole and out the window, and you could see me looking at you through the peephole and out the window, and I will not answer because I did not invite you. Don't just pop up, even like with FaceTime. Like, I'm not answering a FaceTime message unless you pre-warn me that you are about to FaceTime me. I just feel it to be very intrusive to just pop up in people's space without warning. And so that's what, we were doing during the pandemic as we were, meeting on Zoom. So I say that I was awarded the opportunity to enter into people's spaces because that is a privilege. But during that time, it allowed me to understand that we were the only people, and this may have just been an epiphany for me. Maybe everyone else has always recognized it and known it to be so. But for me, I realized that that we are the only people to see through the eyes that we see. And I kind of said this before in another talk, but we're the only ones that see out of these eyes. And interpret the world the way that we interpret it. We cannot assume that everyone interprets the world or interprets experiences the way that we interpret experiences. You can have two individuals grow up in the same household and tell two entirely, completely different stories about their childhood. You could put two individuals in a room for a short amount of time and give very specific directions as to what they're supposed to do, and they can come out with two entirely different experiences from that episode because we are individuals and we come to the table with experiences. We come to the table with other pieces of knowledge. We come to the table with ourselves and how we've already interpreted different situations, and we bring that level of interpretation and we bring that level of understanding to every experience that we have. We cannot assume that people know. Common sense is not common. It is only common to the person who is making sense of it. And so we can't be like, well, it's just common sense for you to know. Well, is it? It may take a conversation to understand how that person has interpreted the information that was delivered to them to get on a even playing field or a level playing field to communicate on how to move forward. So then I go back to tell me what you want. People don't know what you want and what you need unless you tell them. And sometimes, and I've been there, in spaces, in places where you're apprehensive or fearful or are struck with anxiety for communicating a need or a want with the fear of no, or the fear of how others will react. I say, allow people to tell you what they want and tell you what they need, so that then you can determine how or if you show up, or how or if you are willing to show up. A person may have a need that you may very well be able to fulfill and willing to fulfill, but you don't know unless they communicate that need. And if you have a need, you won't know unless you communicate it. And a person could tell you a need or what they perceive to be a need based on the task or based on the environment, whereby after hearing that need, another individual may interpret that as, well, because of your experience or a limited amount of information, you identify that as a need because you see it to only be completed this way. But with my resources and my experience, I may see that as a want. I may hear the need, but see that as a want because there's other ways to complete the task or other ways to get things done or get what fill the gap of whatever that is. And so the need may be communicated, but the actual thing that's to close a gap, if you will, if I'm making sense, may not be that specific of a need. There may be other ways. So just going back to the whole environment of providing an environment that allows people to communicate their needs and their wants. The other day, my daughter wanted to play outside, but she was very specific on how she needed, quote unquote, to play outside. She wanted to play with a particular friend, and at that moment, she was in her mood and her feeling, as we all get, and she didn't want to play with another friend. She just wanted to play with one other particular friend. And she was getting all ready to go, and a friend knocked at the door for her to play, and it happened to be the friend that she was not wanting to play with on that particular day. So she lets me know that they're there and she doesn't want to play. So I was like, well, tell them. I'm thinking, how? Don't put me out there. I'm not about to do your dirty work. Tell them that you don't want to play. And she was like, no, because they're going to get mad. And I'm like, I mean, I was like dumbfounded, like, okay, I mean, like, what's more important? What it is that you feel like you want to do, or their feelings? I mean, and granted, I appreciate her empathy and appreciate that she was caring for their feelings, but then my ego jumped in, honestly. And I'm a big proponent about removing your ego, but in order to remove it, first you got to recognize it. But it did, because I was like, wait a minute, you don't have no problem hurting my feelings and telling me what you want and what you feel like you need. You set aside my feelings, so why are we putting your friends' feelings up front to decide what you want and what you need? So I'm like, that okay, but then I had to set my ego aside and say, okay, let me help her navigate through this. Let that person know that you don't want to play right now and play with someone else. Now, as I'm saying it to her, I realize how difficult of a task that is, because we don't. Oftentimes, most times. Now, there are some people, obviously, and there's been times where I'm like, I don't really care about your feelings right now because I have to protect mine. And I've been there, but I've also been there where it's like, I do care about this person's feelings. So I do want to make sure I tread lightly, and I do want to make sure that I take their feelings into consideration. So how do you navigate that space? And we've now lived in a world where we are kind of anxiety stricken by what the other person will say when we tell them how we feel, or we tell them what we want, or we tell them what we need. We put aside our feelings and our needs based on how the other person is going to respond and react. And so I've decided to kind of try to make a habit of providing a space that allows others to feel comfortable with communicating their needs and their wants, because then it allows me to say how I'm willing to show up or if I'm not. And I would want others to do the same for me. Now, it's quite ironic that, again, our kids, this space is so comfortable for them that they can tell us. But I do remember as a child being fearful of asking my parents or my mom for something, because I was afraid that they were already going to say no, or what they were going to say, or how they're going to react, or telling them what I need. I think it may just be something innate. I don't know. It may be something that we've developed through experiences. As I'm going through this journey and I uncover things, I will certainly share it. Um, so I've already communicated that, I was studying like the Hebrew and the Greek language, so that as I'm doing my Bible study, I'm able to get a contextual understanding of what I'm reading. And so in my studies, most recently, I'm reading the book of Joshua, and in chapter 15, I came across something that I feel is very pertinent to what I'm talking about today. And by no means am I a preacher. Um, but I do feel that it does help to drive this point, because it stamped in me. And so I was like, I mean, that's a good point. I want to think about that. But in Joshua 15, this is a very short chapter. Stick with me because I am going somewhere with this, but it's a very short chapter. But in that chapter, it discussed how Joshua was separating the promised land to the Israelites. And in the 15th chapter, it was particularly talking about the land that was given to the tribe of Judah. And as you move to about the middle of that chapter, it talks about the piece of land that was given to Caleb. And at first, when I first read it, I was just like, okay, like this town, that town. And I read it one day and I just put a note there. I was like, look back at it, because I really didn't get anything out of it besides, all right, I saw that it separated um a land, and then it separated another piece of land, and then it separated a town. And I was like, all right, whatever. But I went back and reread it a second time. And when I read it a second time, something highlighted to me that I feel it kind of speaks to this message. Um, so Caleb had a daughter, and after doing more research, it was his only daughter. And if you know anything about history, not just the Bible, and women were considered property. And so they were considered a high price property. And so it was like major. If you gave your daughter away in marriage, that was like paying major price for a task done. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying that's the way that it was. And so just helping you to understand this point. So Caleb wanted a warrior or some type person to fight for this particular piece of land, for the part of the land that was given to him. And so he put out a award, which was his daughter, in marriage if that person can, defeat the land and for him, the people of that land. And so a particular individual, Othaniel or something like that, starts with an O, won. And it happened to be Caleb's nephew. Now, again, all of these specific little details are not important to the story, but for those of you that may want to follow the story, that's what it is. And so, Daniel, I don't know how to pronounce his name, was able to marry Caleb's daughter, R.A. something. When I looked it up, her name meant anklet. But he was able to marry her. Now, the part that I want to get to for this message was, I didn't see this part the first time, but his daughter was getting off of a donkey. Well, she urged her husband to ask for another particular piece of land. They were already getting the land that they fought for, which was a part of the space of land that was given to Caleb. They were already getting that. And so in that moment, it looks like, you're asking for more or whatever. Didn't read that at first, didn't read that at all. But when it said she urged her husband to ask for, I was like, because this stuck out to me, I want to look at it a little bit more. And then it said when she got off the donkey, Caleb asked her, what's wrong, or what do you need? But it never spoke about her demeanor. She didn't say anything. She didn't do anything besides getting off the donkey. So in my parental mind, I thought in order for him to know that she needed something or wanted something or something was wrong, there had to be some visual gestures. Now, parents, stick with me. We know when our children are plotting on something, are angry about something, because they'll twist their face up, stump their feet, cross their arms. If they're plotting for something, they start doing miraculous cleaning, like vacuuming when they've never vacuumed before, putting away dishes or washing dishes when usually they give you a hard time. So you kind of thinking like, what do you want? What's wrong? What's going on? And so I started thinking that his daughter had to be giving some type of physical gesture to make him ask what's wrong or what does she want. So I'm going to come back to that point, but I want to go back to creating a space that allows people to ask or communicate their need or their want. Sometimes we have to, like I've mentioned before, listen with our eyes and listen with our ears. And when we're listening with our eyes, we can recognize a need or want in somebody's lives as we're building and developing relationships, whether that's, personal, parental relationships, friendships, or even romantic relationships, business relationships, all of those things. Sometimes we just have to give it a listening eye. So I'm thinking as a parent that his daughter was doing something for him to ask, what's wrong? What do you need? And in that moment, she did communicate. She asked for another piece of land. And so because it was there, I'm like, why? Why was there ask for another piece of land? In that moment, it could look like just a want, just wanting more. Um, but as I've researched more, the piece of land that was originally given to her was a land that was known to be, fairly dry. So an area like a desert area, an area that didn't have a lot of water. So the land that she was asking for after getting off the donkey and her father recognizing something was wrong was a land that was full of springs. So it was land that had more availability of water to accommodate the land that was dry. And so the look like a want after asking what she wanted or communicating that, it turned out to actually be a need. And had she not said anything with her body language and then communicating when she was asked, she would have went without. So the points that I make with that is sometimes communicating with others about what you want or what you need, it helps to determine or decipher distinguish, I should say, between a need and a want. Sometimes what you feel like you need is really a want because of the resources and the information that the other person has. Sometimes what you feel like you want is really a need, but because you're not used to it or you do have a lack of experience or knowledge, you don't recognize that as being a need and see it as a want. But then also, if you don't communicate what you want or what you need, then you get nothing. You're back to where you started. And I like to say sometimes too, and I have to take this as my own advice, what's the worst the person can say is no. The worst they can say is no. And if they say no, you're no further behind than what you started. You're just right where you started. But asking puts you a little bit closer, not further, put you a little bit closer to a yes than it does by not asking, because a no just puts you right back where you were. Then providing that space that allows people to feel comfortable in asking for, communicating what they need and what they want. This daughter in the book of Joshua ended up with a whole other piece of land just by communicating what she wants and what she needs. Ask what you want. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you need, because I'm not a mind reader. No one will know what you want or what you need based on their knowledge. You have to tell them. You have to tell them what you want and what you need. The onus is on you. They can observe, and I can observe all day long with my eyes, but sometimes what I perceive to be a need or a want may not necessarily be a need or a want. That person may not have needed me to do that, may not even have wanted me to do that. Sometimes we show up in spaces thinking, oh, they need this, and be like, I didn't need you to do that. It could be quite demeaning sometimes for us to show up and just determine what someone needs. But on the flip side, in order for someone to know what you need and what you want, you must tell them what you need and what you want. Tell me what you need. Tell me what you want.